Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber and alongside me is Logan Camden. And because it is officially football season, we are in full force with the NFL content now. We just ranked quarterbacks in the NFL a couple days ago. You can check that show out. Today, we are going to be beginning our division previews. We're going to do these one by one, and we're going to start with one of the most interesting divisions in all of football, Logan, that being the NFC North. So, we'll start as we always do. Who do you have on top of this division and why?
Not only interesting, Carson, I think this is going to be one of the most competitive divisions in all of football this year. I am super excited for it. Atop the division, I have the Detroit Lions going 12-5, and I'm going to preface this as we always do, as we did last year. I have yet to go through every single team's schedule, so because there's only a finite amount of games, these records are subject to change, but I assume I will speak for you as well, Carson. I think our order of the divisions and what teams will be atop of them will stay the same.
Yes.
And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let the cat out the bag, Carson. The Lions are my current pick to win the NFC. Last season, they won 12 games. Technically, they were a 13-win team. We all saw the Dallas Cowboys game and the nonsense that went on at the end of that one.
So that's not actually what the word technically means.
I think that one
means
got stolen
in Logan
from them.
Camden world, they were a 13-win team.
All right, well, in everybody's
just like the
world,
Steelers were a 13-win team last year.
Well, just like the Steelers were the Super Bowl winners last year. That was what happened in Logan Camden world. Anyways, not only were they really close to winning 13 games, they were really close to being the representative in the NFC last year. They went up 24-7 in the NFC title game versus San Francisco, smacked them in the mouth out of the gates, had that touchdown immediately. The Lions got really close. And so I'm left with the question for this season, what changed? Well, with most teams, they lose a lot. This team returns their head coach. They return their offensive coordinator. They return the defensive coordinator. And a strong tenet for every competitive team in football, I think you got to be strong in the trenches. This is one of the strongest trench teams in all of football. For my money, I think this is the strongest trench team coming into football this season. The offensive line returns Penei Sewell, I think the best offensive lineman in all of football. Big respect to Big Trent Williams and what he's been doing for a very long time in this game. I think it's Penei Sewell. That dude has a mean, nasty streak to him. I think he's the best O-lineman in football. Along with him, returning Frank Ragnow, Graham Glasgow, Taylor Decker. On the D-line, you're returning Aiden Hutchinson and Aleem McNeil. And both of those sides have gotten better. They added on the offensive line Kevin Zeitler from the Ravens, and on the defensive line, they have added DJ Reader. Those are massive, massive adds. And so when you look at the other pieces, I think they have a really reliable offensive formula. Say what you want about Jared Goff. I think he is a real steadying presence at this point in his career. I think he is a rock-solid pro. You've got an all-pro first-teamer in Amon-Ra St. Brown. You've got another big-time playmaker opposite him in Jamison Williams. And then you've got a really good thunder-lightning kind of tandem in the backfield of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. So I think it's a really reliable offensive formula. Also, I do want to note Jahmyr Gibbs reportedly suffered an injury in training camp. There's no real news on if that's long-term, if that's short-term, if he's going to miss the start of the season. So something to keep an eye on, but I really do love the tandem back there. I love Jahmyr Gibbs. The real question to me, Carson, and what determines the ceiling of this team is really how much better can the secondary be this season. Opposing quarterbacks last year against the Lions, 4,200 passing yards, 28 TDs to 16 picks. They were 27th in total yards and TDs allowed, and they were 29th in yards per attempt. They say goodbye to Cam Sutton. Good riddance. That guy was buns last year for the Lions. They trade for Carlton Davis. I think that's a plus. They draft defensive backs in the first 2 rounds. Again, I think another important thing to mention here, Rakestraw and Terrion Arnold apparently also suffered injuries here in the preseason, so just something to monitor. Those guys are supposed to be immediate impact rookies, so that really does matter in terms of how great they can be. But there's a great culture. It has been a heroic and a historic turnaround for this Lions team under the helm of Dan Campbell. And again, most of these teams, when we see a regression from one season to the next, it's because you lost a lot of assets or there's a complete overhaul of your coaching staff. There's not a lot of variable change here in Detroit. You have a lot of the same supporting cast coming back, and in a lot of ways, I think they improved. So I think Detroit is only primed to get better next season, and I'm putting all my chips in on the table. I think this is the year they get that monkey off their back, Carson. I think they exercise those Bobby Lane demons, and I think the Detroit Lions go to their first Super Bowl in franchise history. That's my take. I think they win the NFC.
I love it. And let me tell you what, Logan, I have the Detroit Lions winning 13 games this year, and I have them as my number 1 seed in the NFC. I think that although they do have a tough schedule, because their own division is very tough, and they have to face the NFC West, which is a very tough division, and they got to play the Bills as well. They've got a tough schedule in front of them, but there's just not a lot of games at all that I would view them as underdogs in. And you hit on the key, and obviously the strength of this team is going to be this dominant offense, which has been a top 5 unit the last 2 years, and it's one of the most balanced offenses in football. Last year, they were 2nd in passing yards, 3rd in passing yards per attempt, and top 5 in both rushing yards and yards per attempt. I believe that they have the best offensive line in football. They have an elite running back tandem. They have an elite tight end and an elite wide receiver 1. And although they lose Josh Reynolds, who I did think was a productive member of that receiving core last year, I am excited to see Jameson Williams fully healthy and more featured in the offense. I know that he maybe isn't the most refined yet. He hasn't been the most productive, but my God, he is an explosive athlete. And this is an offense that has been really good at unlocking those chunk plays. I think having a speed threat downfield like that is just going to make them all the more dynamic. But what's so replicable, Logan, is what you mentioned, right? This is about trench dominance. This is about running the football. This is about simple play action, getting the ball to your playmakers. Jared Goff doesn't have to be a top 10 guy. Not for them to win 12 or 13 games in the regular season. And he's put together 2 really good seasons back-to-back. He has averaged over these last 2 years 4,500 yards, 30 touchdowns, just under 10 interceptions, and 7.6 yards per attempt. And you keep Ben Johnson, who has been such an important architect of this. So all of the key pieces offensively for the Lions, you are bringing back not just personnel, but also the mind behind it all. And then on the defensive side of the ball, that's always going to be the question, right? What level can Detroit play at on that end? Because that held them back from making the playoffs 2 years ago. Last year, that was what raised the questions about them. You think about their losses. They let up 37 to Seattle. They let up 38 and 500 yards to Baltimore. And then they have that stretch of the year where it's like shootout after shootout, not necessarily against great offenses. They let up 38 to the Chargers, 26 to the Bears, 28 to the Bears, 28 to the Saints, 29 to the Packers. And that was the stretch where I became most concerned about them last year. But they pulled it together at the end. They were never one of the league's best defenses, but they got to a more respectable level, and their personnel has improved. And they still have clear defensive strengths. Like, I think without question, this is the best overall trench team when you consider offensive and defensive line. I'd give a nod to the Eagles. I think that with the loss of Jason Kelsey, they would probably be knocked down just the tiniest bit, because this is the best offensive line, and it's probably a top 3 defensive line. McNeil and Hutchinson were dominant last year. DJ Reader is excellent. And Marcus Davenport is more of a question mark, but should be an upgrade because they really had no impact from that second edge rusher position alongside Aiden Hutchinson last year. They were already a top 3 run defense by yards allowed and yards per attempt. They should only get better there. They were number 1 in terms of pressure rate last year, and that front is now improved. I like their linebacker core with Jack Campbell and Anzalone. Like, it's all about the secondary. Bottom 5 pass defense last year, and as you mentioned, they made major changes. But overall, I think that they absolutely added talent to that unit. Prioritizing corner in the first couple rounds. I think moving Brian Branch to safety is going to be interesting. It's going to be an adjustment, but I think he absolutely has the talent to thrive there. So there's a major overhaul in the secondary, but I think the injection of talent is probably going to be a net positive, and that group can't struggle much more than they did last year. So overall, I look at that defensive unit. They were 26th in points allowed per drive last year. I think they should absolutely be better than that with their clear improvements up front and with what I expect to be improvements on the back end. So I think now this is probably an above average defense and an offense that you know is going to be elite with a very, very consistent formula. So the only question that I have about this team is not in the regular season. It's not about racking up wins there. It's just going to be, is their secondary Super Bowl caliber? Because I love that front 7, but that's a real question. And can Jared Goff reach the level that you need to win a Super Bowl? Because there does come a point where it's okay. There's going to be one game where you aren't able to establish the ground and pound game in the same way. And maybe your defense gets you in a hole, right? And you need your quarterback to elevate to the level of the elite. And as good as Goff has proven himself to be when things are on time, when he is making his play action reads, the arm talent is there. He's very limited in terms of his mobility. He is very limited in terms of his creation outside the pocket. And sometimes when things get off schedule, you get those Jared Goff moments. He's cut down on the turnovers overall, but there was a couple of back-breaking ones last year, and I do still think that Bozo gene, as much as I love him as a Cal Bear, is still in there, and that's the concern. Can he avoid those killer mistakes, and can he reach that elevator level that the modern course of NFL history tells us you almost certainly need from your quarterback, no matter how good your roster is? I don't think that's out of the question. I don't know that I would bet on it, though. So I love the Lions. I think that they're going to be the best regular season team in the NFC. Those are just my couple concerns with them.
I completely agree with that point. And the secondary and Goff are going to be the biggest determinants on if they actually can make this Super Bowl run, especially when you're looking at the other teams in the NFC, right? In the NFC title game, a lot of shot plays surrendered to the 49ers. All of the teams that they're probably going to run up against in the NFC can make those big-time plays. If it's Dallas and Dak and CeeDee Lamb, if it's Green Bay and it's Jordan Love, and I think Jordan Love throws one of the best deep balls in all of football, right? Whoever they run into in the NFC, that's going to be a huge component of it, and Jared Goff is a part of that. And I honestly thought during this run, Goff had some back-breaking plays that didn't end up happening, right? Where the Lions luck out a little bit, where he makes a few more mistakes that don't show up in the box score or the stat sheet, where they luck out a little bit. Those are going to be the big factors. The last thing I do want to touch on, too, you mentioned Brian Branch going back to safety. I think that's going to be better for him. I think Branch is arguably going to be the best defensive back in this in this secondary. And I also just think he's much more well-suited to play safety. I think that's more of his natural position, and I think he's going to thrive there. So, yeah, you're looking at a team that's going to be a top 10, probably top 5 offense, and a team that is going to be a better-than-average defense. To me, that is just an easy recipe for success. And it is a huge benefit that in the regular season, Jared Goff's role is going to be to float the ship. It's not going to be to play Superman. He has to play, he's going to play Robin a little bit. He can play the second fiddle, and he can just float the ship a little bit. And I think Jared Goff is very well equipped to do that. The big question is, can he step up in the big stage when there are better quarterback talents in the NFC? And you're going to have to slay some of those guys to get there. I think he can do it, man. You talked a lot about in our Top 10 QBs episode experience, Carson, and I have so much more faith. I think Jared Goff is just a completely different quarterback than the guy he was in L.A., than the guy he was in Detroit when he entered here in his first season. I think he's more poised. I think he is more composed. I do think it is about avoiding those Jared Goff moments, though, man. I hate pointing it out. I hate doing that to him. Every time we bring up the Lions, we're going to bring up Jared Goff. You're just hoping that guy doesn't rear his ugly head. But I'm all in, man. I've loved what I've seen from Detroit. I think they're an ascending team. I think they've got a great culture, and I think they've got a ton of talent. I think this is the year they break through.
I would like to see it. They're a very, very fun team.
I do want to ask yet, though. So do you have any structure? Do you have a pick out of the NFC yet, or are you waiting until you figure out the rest of our previews before you make a pick?
I'm waiting. I don't have a pick in terms of who's coming out of the conference in the playoffs yet. I want to get closer to the regular season to see how healthy everybody is. There's also obviously still some significant holdouts. We don't know what's happened with Ayuk yet, but you mentioned the point about Goff having a duel with some quarterbacks in the NFC who may be above his level. The thing is, within the NFC, there really isn't a team that is on the Lions level in terms of roster talent that also has an elite quarterback, in my opinion. Like,
you don't think the Rams?
I don't think the Rams roster is as good as the Lions roster. No, I do not. In fact, I'm worried that defense is going to take a step back in a post-Aaron Donald world. I think the Lions are a ridiculously complete football team, man. You just look position group to position group. I mean, offensively, it's a utopia. Their coaching staff is great. The only team to me that is on the Lions level in the NFC in terms of talent, you can talk about the Eagles. They're not far. The Cowboys obviously have a lot of very dynamic talents, but it's not like Dak and Hurts are bona fide consistent superstars anyways. And then when it comes to the Niners question, who do I trust more between Purdy and Goff? It's pretty darn close. Purdy was able to pull through this past year. I thought that he made some big nuts plays. I thought that he did. He's got the playmaking gene. I thought that he was mentally tough in that game. He was also pretty erratic in that game. So in any single game format, I don't think there's a big gap between the two, and I probably slightly prefer Goff. And so it's not so much about the NFC. Of course, Goff can't mess things up, but where I really worry about the gap is if they were to get to the Super Bowl, and let's say it's Patrick Mahomes on the other side, or let's say it's Lamar Jackson with a loaded Ravens team on the other side. That is where I would be concerned. Or let's say it's Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills. Let's just say I don't know that Jared Goff is hanging in that environment. But also, I'm not confident necessarily that he would hold them back because this team is that good and he is definitely able to thrive in this situation overall. So we agree the Lions are atop the division. There's a couple other teams, though, that are very much trending upwards and weren't as established as the Lions, but I could definitely see some people riding the momentum, being very optimistic about the outlook for these younger teams and picking them to win the division. So who do you have in that 2 spot here?
I could too. I would hear an argument, but considering what they did last season, I think they're stamped at number 2. And I have the Green Bay Packers in my 2nd spot here. And I want to be clear about something. I don't think the margins are that large between Green Bay and Detroit. Right now, I have the Lions winning 12 games. Again, these may subject to change considering on how the rest of the schedule shake out. I have the Packers at 11 wins. But I can wholeheartedly see the Packers winning the NFC North and winning the NFC outright.
Wow.
I think the Packers are in my Super Bowl bubble, and I think who wins the head-to-head battle is likely going to determine this division between Green Bay and between Detroit. Returning this year with Green Bay is the youngest roster in football for the 2nd straight year. Leading out that group is obviously the young gun Jordan Love. And I think he's ascended to top 10, but it surprised me, Carson. There was a lot of skepticism and a lot of pushback, not only from people in our comment section talking about them skeptical that Jordan Love can repeat this in his 2nd full starting year, but also some of my friends saying that they just don't really buy into the hype yet. I'll read off the numbers. Full season as a starter, 9-8, 4,159 passing yards, 32 TDs, 11 picks, a completion percentage of 64%. And he also added in 4 rushing touchdowns. In the final 8-game regular season stretch, 270 yards per game, 18 TDs to 1 pick, a passer rating of 112.7, and a completion percentage of 70%. I'm looking at a guy that got his real taste of NFL football in the first half of the season. That is a learning period for quarterbacks. There's going to be a lot of ups, there's going to be a lot of downs, there's going to be a lot of learning moments there. And I just thought we saw a guy that really improved and took major strides in the middle of the year. And I think Jordan Love's only going to get better with more and more experience. Love loves to push the ball downfield. That is one thing that really shows in the tape. And I think he's one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL. He was 7th in average air yards per attempt last season. Again, only 6 quarterbacks surpass him in that mark. And I think he got a lot better at throwing with anticipation and throwing guys open. I also thought he got a lot better with taking the easy stuff. A lot of his errors in the first half of the year were from being too aggressive, trying to do too much. And I think he got a lot more comfortable as the year went along. Now, ironically, as you mentioned in our Top 10 QBs episode, his season ended with him forcing a ball downfield. But there's a lot of stuff I love with Jordan Love. I love his footwork in the pocket. I love his scrambling and play extension upside. I love his arm, his accuracy. And again, I think he's going to continue to get better. And then when we flip and we look at the other side of the ball, you have an improved defense, I think. I think they're going to get a lot better with Joe Barry out. I thought Joe Barry was a disaster statistically. 17th passing defense by yards per attempt, 23 in terms of rushing defense. It was just the play calling, some of the situational stuff that was frustrating with Joe Barry. You return a lot of the talent, Jair Alexander, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, Quay Walker, Kenny Clark, Isaiah McDuffie, and now you add in Xavier McKinney, who was an elite safety last season. 3 picks, he allowed no touchdowns, and minimum 50 passes defended, or 50 pass attempts to him. He allowed an opposing passer rating of 41.4, so I think you're injecting a really great defensive back into this defense. Also offensive, I didn't even mention, Aaron Jones unhealthy, you're adding in Josh Jacobs, who I don't think is washed. I think it was an abysmal situation he was in Vegas. This is a very young team with a lot of young talent that I think is poised to get a lot better, Carson. And they've injected some more defensive and offensive talent here. So I really do think the Packers have a shot at winning this division. I just think the Lions are a little bit more talented, a little bit more established. But the Packers are a very, very good football team, and I would not at all be surprised if they won this division.
Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty common sentiment, and especially after how well they finished the year last year and how well they played in the playoffs, destroying the Cowboys, playing the Niners very tight. It felt like a lot of people viewed them and the Texans as like those two ascending teams that were going to take the leap from young, fun, scrappy playoff teams with their rising young quarterbacks to being legit contenders much sooner rather than later. And they ended the year a force to be reckoned with. I mean, they were playing fantastic football. They won 6 of their last 8 in the regular season. Then they won a playoff game. I still do think the Lions are a good bit more talented and a good bit more reliable. And if we just sort of go group by group, I think that the Lions have a significantly better offensive line. I think that the Lions have a better receiving core. I think the Lions certainly have a better running back room overall. I think that the Lions have a significantly better defensive front. I prefer the Lions linebacker core. And so the two advantages that the Packers do have are the two question marks that we mentioned with the Lions. I think that their secondary is better, and I think that Jordan Love is better than Jared Goff. There's certainly a ceiling with Love that is far beyond what Goff can accomplish, but overall, I had Jordan Love as my 10th best QB going into next year. I would have Goff probably in like that 14 range, so I don't think it's a huge gap. I have the Packers in the playoffs. I have them winning 10 games, but I do think that there's a gap between them and Detroit, and a lot of their success this year is just going to hinge on who exactly is Jordan Love? What level do we get from Jordan Love? Because that, far more than anything else, is what flipped their season on its head last year. He was phenomenal down the stretch, right? Last 10 games, he's over 2,600 yards, 23 touchdowns, 3 picks, 112 passer rating. But if you just look at the wins and losses split, and to be fair, they won a lot more games down the stretch because he was playing a lot better, but overall on the year in wins, Love averaged 264 passing yards per game, 8 yards per attempt, threw 20 touchdowns to 1 interception with a passer rating of 112. In losses, he threw for 222 yards per game, more than 40 fewer, 6.3 yards per attempt, which is not good, 12 touchdowns to 10 interceptions with a passer rating of 79. So, as long as he is more like the Jordan Love who we saw in the second half of the year, there's no reason that the Packers shouldn't improve, because although I think he played exceptionally well and was taking amazing care of the football, and like, you're not going to get that sort of production consistently over 17 games, I think you should expect him to be much better than he was in the first half of the year. And having 17 games of a more mature, comfortable Jordan Love, who looks more like the top 10 sort of quarterback we saw in the second half of the year, should just make them a better team. And that's what I believe he is. I believe that he did dramatically improve throughout the course of last year. In terms of the overall offense, though, I don't think that they are overwhelmingly talented. Losing Aaron Jones does matter to me. Like, bringing in Josh Jacobs is a solid solution to that, but I do think that Aaron Jones is a better runner of the football. I think there's a reason he's consistently more efficient. I think that his vision is excellent. I think he's very agile and very reliable, very productive when it matters most, especially. So you still have a good running back. You got 3 years younger. I do prefer Aaron Jones, though. And I like this receiving core. I like Romeo Doubs. I like Jaden Reed. I thought that Doubs was excellent in the playoffs. And the depth of this group is good, right? You have Wicks. You have Christian Watson, who every once in a while comes in and makes his big athletic play. You have Luke Musgrave, who I thought was pretty productive and solid when healthy last year. But they're definitely lacking in high-end playmakers, like absolute difference makers. And the group should be trending up across the board, but I don't know that any of these guys are going to be a legit wide receiver one this year. So should be more consistent offensively because Love will be better. The skill guys will be a little bit better. But again, I don't see the sort of elite talent across the board that I do in Detroit. And defensively, they were not very good last year. They were 26th in yards allowed per drive. They were 23rd in points allowed per drive. And they really struggled to stop the run. McKinney, I think, is going to help in both aspects, both with the run defense and with the pass defense. I think that he was an excellent addition.
Excellent tackler, too.
Excellent tackler. Absolutely one of the best at the safety position in that role. And they're also asking the rookie bowler to start alongside him in terms of that safety tandem. And they really went defense and O-line heavy in the draft. So they prioritized the defense. I think that they should be improved there. Cuz McKinney is a great add. I'm with you. I didn't like Joe Barry's play calling last year. I don't necessarily see them taking the leap to being a real high-end defense, though. I think that they're going to be more in that sort of average range. So I expect a more consistent offensive season. I expect them to be solid on the defensive side. I just don't see the elite talent that I feel maybe some people are projecting because of how strong they finished last year. And they had a couple really good wins down the stretch of last year, beating the Chiefs, beating the Lions, beating the Cowboys, of course, in a really dominant fashion in the playoffs. They also beat up on some shitty teams down the stretch. They still took a couple bad losses in those last 5 weeks to the Giants, to the Bucs by 2 touchdowns. So I'm in on the Packers. I like the Packers. I just don't love them legitimately being like on equal footing with the Lions. I don't think that they're there yet.
Yeah, equal footing's a good way to put it. I think that it is a lot to do with that's what's really interesting about this team. When you have so many young guys like this, you don't know who's going to drastically improve. That's the encouraging thing is the Packers, this shouldn't be like their last stand. They should be around for a while and really competitive. But it is what kind of ceiling you're getting. I do think there is a talent gap. I don't mean to put them on that level, but I do think that how competitive this division, it's going to shrink it. I think the win total for all these teams is going to be really, really close, probably within 5 or 6 wins of everybody from first to last. I think that there's not going to be any real bottom feeders or bottom dwellers. Let me ask you this. Do you think that Jordan Love is going to have to play at like an MVP kind of level to convince you that this team's a real contender? Is that where you're at?
I think so. And that's part of where I do think that we'll see a bit of a gap in terms of the regular season wins. I think for the Packers to be a 12-win team, that requires Jordan Love heroics. And again, I don't think he's maintaining the 23-3 touchdown interception ratio that you saw in the home stretch of last year. I do think that although he clearly matured and got a lot better, the young quarterback who did attempt to throw across his body on first down into triple coverage on the last play of the season, I just think there's still some things to be worked through there. I think he's very, very good. I think he has the tools to be an elite quarterback. And he's already pretty close to that, but he's definitely firmly in that tier 2 still to me. And the Packers aren't overwhelmingly talented enough for me to be like with a top 10 sort of quarterback, like around the 10th best quarterback in the league. That team's going to contend for a Super Bowl. I don't see where they dominate games if it's not on the back of Love being amazing. And LaFleur is great. Play calling is great. I believe that they'll still be an effective rushing attack. I think they'll do a lot of things well offensively, just not necessarily at like the level that you're going to get from the Lions.
And that's a fair criticism. I mean, again, on the other side of that young roster coin is the growing pains that we could experience. You know, it might not all be roses in this second season, but I am expecting much more good than bad for Green Bay. And I think they're a wild card team. I think they'll be really competitive. And I do think that they're going to make it close on Detroit. They're not going to let Detroit completely run away with this division. I think it'll be a close race.
I think they'll be in the playoffs. I'm with you there. And I really like Jordan Love, man. I love Jordan Love, as it seems impossible to avoid saying. Throw another shrimp on the barbie. Get in on all the UFC 305 action live from the land down under at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of UFC. The middleweight title's on the line for the main event, but the card is stacked full of rip snorter blokes and Sheilas.
And speaking of stacked, if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $150 instantly in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you just bet $5. UFC 305, it's going to be a ripper of a good time. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Okay, let's move on. Who do you have third in this division, Logan?
I've got the Bears. I've got the Bears in my third spot. The Chicago Bears finally are primed to be competitive. And the first guy that I want to give props is Ryan Poles in this front office. I just want to give a ton of credit to them. A couple years ago, if you had asked me who the worst front office and organization was in football, I would have told you it was Chicago. After they gave up that second round pick to get Chase Claypool, that's when I kind of punted on Chicago ever making real moves. And then this last year, they've crushed. Last year, the Caleb Williams trade to trade away the number one pick to get DJ Moore and then get the future number one pick, which turns out to be Caleb Williams. Home run.
Home run.
Drafting Roma Dunze this year. Trading for Montez Sweat and only giving up a second round pick. I mean, Sweat completely transformed this defense the second that he came in. Drafting and re-signing Jalen Johnson. I was afraid that because of the turmoil in this organization that Jalen Johnson may just want to walk. He's one of the best corners in football. Acquiring Keenan Allen. I mean this when I say it. I think this is one of the best situations a rookie quarterback has ever stepped into weapons-wise. Tell me if you think there's anybody that comes off to the top of your mind, Carson, but when we're just looking at, like, weapons, having DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Roma Dunze all at your disposal, to me, those are three guys that you could argue as number one wideouts.
Amen.
And that is disgusting. I mean, I'm trying to rack my brain right now. Like, I can't think of any quarterback that has stepped in and had that kind of luxury from day one. When you couple that with that being one of the greatest quarterback talents I've ever evaluated, that's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge. And Justin Fields, as much as Steelers fans want to do the revisionist history and as much as people want to argue for him, he held them back last season. And I think his offensive coordinator held Justin Fields back. I don't think the Bears let him play the game that he wanted to play, but he's not a good passer of the football. Fields is just not a good pocket passer right now. That's a reality of him as a QB. So real quick, before we get into how great we both think Caleb is and what he does really well and what we expect for him, Carson, I want to play a quick game with you real quick.
Hooray.
Called Can Caleb Williams Break These Single-Season Bears Passing Records in Year 1? Also, I want to see if we're going to do a little trivia here, see if you can guess who holds these records.
Okay.
3,838 passing yards. First of all, do you know who holds this record for the Bears currently?
So my inclination is to say Cutler, but I don't think that that's right. Is it Eric Kramer?
Eric Kramer in 1995.
Yeah.
Do you think he breaks this record?
I do think that he breaks this record. 17 games, give him a little boost. I think that we're going to see the Bears throw the football a lot more than they did last year. And I think that he is an incredibly dynamic talent, like a historically great talent, who, as you mentioned, is being handed the greatest wealth of receiving talent that we've seen a highly touted quarterback prospect or any rookie quarterback walk into. He has 3 number 1 receivers. I believe that deeply in Roma Dunze. I think that he is a freak athlete. I think he's going to be a monster. And Caleb wanted him. Yeah, I think that he breaks 4,000 yards as a rookie.
I think he does. I think he also breaks the Bears' single-season passing record in year 1. Okay, 29 touchdowns. I'll spoil it. That is also held by Eric Kramer.
Oh, what a season he had.
Yeah, 1995, man. Bears fans are probably still thinking back on it. Do you think Caleb can break that record in year 1?
29 touchdowns is a lot. That would be the rookie record, right? Didn't Herbert set it with 29? Or
I believe that would break the record.
yeah, if you got to 30, that would be the first time that any rookie QB's done that. I will say he falls just short of this one.
Herbert had 31.
Oh, what a monster.
But I am with you. I think 29 is... I can honestly see him hovering right around 27, 28.
It's right about where I put the over-under.
30 is just really tough. Okay, last two, both held by... With my side, who do you think holds passer rating and completion percentage, Carson?
Passer rating and completion percentage. Hold on, let me think for a second. Is it Rex Grossman?
It's not Rex Grossman. It's a
oh, yeah, of course. It's Mitch 6 touchdowns, MVP, Trubisky.
2018, Mitch Trubisky did both of these. 95.4, that is a pretty high bar, and a 66.6 completion percentage mark. Do you think Caleb can surpass either of those?
I think that he'll again be in the vicinity. I mean, passers just get more efficient year over year. I think that his play style is going to be very aggressive, push the ball downfield, which may not lend itself to the highest completion percentage, but I also think he's accurate. I think his processing is very underrated. I do expect him to be efficient. I do expect him to be able to guide you down the field on methodical drives. I think people talking about him like hunting chunk plays, hunting hero ball is overplayed. Not to say that he didn't do that at USC, but he is so much more polished than other dudes we've seen who had similar athletic tools, right? Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech was playing a wild brand of football. He had to sit for a full year. Josh Allen was playing a wild brand of football, inaccurate, super turnover prone. Caleb Williams threw 93 touchdowns to 14 picks. He consistently led elite offenses at the highest level of football. I just think he's bringing in a different level of polish than any of the dudes that we've seen with comparable tools outside of maybe Andrew Luck. But he's walking into a better situation than Luck. I expect him to be more efficient, less turnover prone as a rookie. So you know what? Because it's Mitch Logan, for you, I'll say that he breaks these records.
I'm with that. I agree with a lot of what you said too, man. One of the things that stood out in preseason, and again, it's just preseason, as I always mention, every year we get to this time, the 0-16 Detroit Lions went 4-0 in that preseason, so take everything that happens in this with a grain of salt. But we did get to see a little bit of Caleb versus the Bills. The first thing that stood out to me was his composure. He does not have happy feet. A lot of young quarterbacks, you see jittery in the pocket, scared. The guy's really composed. He's really comfortable in the pocket. He's got immaculate feel and IQ. I think the guy just feels the game really well. And the thing that shows off, I think the reason people talk about those shot plays and him hunting it is because of the elite play extension ability that Caleb already has. His ability to throw on the run as a rookie is absurd. These crossbody throws, and again, people always point to Pat and Josh, but those are the guys that play that way and that can make these kind of throws. That's why he gets those comparisons already. Consciously, I think he is the best quarterback prospect I've ever seen, up there with Luck. I think he's going to be the best QB in Bears history. Not that that's a really high bar.
It's the lowest bar in all of sports, buddy.
And eventually,
post-merger,
I do think he's going to break.
Shout out Sid Luckman. Let's respect
Shout out Sid Luckman. I think he's eventually going to break all the Bears passing records, single season and other. And the final thing that I want to mention with this offense, too, is think about the collateral effects that these additions offensively, weapons-wise, that they're going to have. One, defenses didn't have to respect the passing game. It was Fields back there. It was one weapon in DJ Moore. You could kind of game plan your defense around that. It just makes you really, really limited offensively. That's just going to stretch out defenses really thin, man. It's going to be really hard to cover all of these guys getting open, especially if Keenan Allen can stay healthy and be on the field all year with both of these other guys. Defense. So I think that Caleb Williams immediately, as a rookie, is going to lead out an above-average offense. I think they're going to be above 16th in the league. Passing, scoring, I think they'd be really good there. Defensively, I still think they leave a lot to be desired. Outside of Montez Sweat, I think the defensive line is really, really raw. Somebody else is going to have to step up there in a meaningful way to move me. I think the linebacking core is solid. I really like TJ Edwards. Tremaine Edmonds is cool. There's not anything special there.
Overrated.
And there's a young group of defensive backs. I think somebody's going to need to make a major leap to really instill confidence there. They were the number 20 scoring defense. They were the number 21 passing defense. Shout out, they were the number 5 rushing defense. So I think they're going to be slightly below average defensively, which holds them back. And again, this division is really tough. And so I think I haven't made a call on Chicago if they're going to make the playoffs. I have them going 9-8. They're number 3 in my division. They're going to be on the fringe. They're going to be one of those last teams, I think, in Week 18, Week 17, battling it out for one of these final wild card spots.
Agreed.
But I think the record may not reflect how improved they are. I think this offense is going to take a major, major leap forward with Caleb and with this influx of talent at the skill positions.
I have them 9-8 as well, and I have them just outside the playoffs. And it is the defensive questions that ultimately hold me back from being all in, because last year there was all the hype about the Bears going worst to first because they added DJ Moore and loaded up on their draft capital and whatnot. And I did not buy into that because I just had too many questions about Justin Fields. And for a number of reasons, I was not in on that. Can't be in on that sort of take this year because the Lions I think so highly of. And because I am a little bit worried about this defense. I don't think it's going to be a bad defense, but I think it'll be mediocre, as you say, which is what they were last year. And I like the secondary. Jalen Johnson is a stud, of course. I think that Byard is a great pickup. I think their linebacking core is fine overall. But I still don't like the front outside of Sweat. I think that it's pretty bad outside of Sweat. And I do worry about the pass rush. They were 26th in pressure rate overall last year, and that did get significantly better once they added Sweat. They went from being dead last to closer to average. They had 10 sacks in 8 games without him. They had 20 sacks in 9 games with him. Like, just adding any sort of dynamic talent to that group that was did meaningfully change things. I just still don't like that personnel up front, and I don't think that they're strong enough in the secondary. I don't think that the linebacking core is full of difference makers, and I think that when I look at 3 groups and I'm like, fine, that kind of means in totality, you're probably going to be slightly below average. And I think the offense will be good. I just don't think it'll be among the league's elite offenses yet. I love Caleb Williams. I expect him to have the best rookie season that we have ever seen from a quarterback. That is a combination of his talent and the fact that I think he is walking into an amazing situation with
better than Stroud.
I think he will be better than Stroud individually. I don't think that he will have the same result of going to the playoffs, but that's more about the side of ball that's outside of his control. Stroud was so good in terms of executing in high stakes situations that maybe the raw touchdown total especially doesn't reflect how great he was. He racked up yards. He was very efficient. He didn't turn the ball over. But I think that Caleb is walking into a better situation with even more talent. I think that he can really put this offense on his back, and the line is pretty solid now. I like what they've done with the tackles. I think the interior of the line is solid. I think that they will be capable running the football. I don't mind the running back room with Swift and Herbert. I like going from Luke Getsy, who I thought was very bad, to Shane Waldron. I think that it should be right around a top 10 offense. But specifically with Caleb, I just don't think that there is a discourse that has been more unnecessarily polarizing that we have seen in football, maybe in football and basketball combined over the last couple years. This is a guy who is so clearly not just an elite football talent, one of the best quarterback talents that we have ever seen. And because of nonsense reasons, because of the fact that he painted his nails and people are so obsessed with their culture wars that they've decided that makes him the devil and that they have to hate him and ignore the reality of who he is as a football player to push some nonsense idea, like that has made him public enemy number 1 for a bunch of football fans. The fact that I guess he didn't play defense, USC was a top 3 offense the last 2 years. They were a terrible defense. Like, people put that on him. There are not, to me, tangible reasons that people can criticize him as a prospect. And again, even the hero ball, that playmaking instinct, I think is mostly a good thing. I think he already has it more under control than guys who have comparable, ridiculous talent that we've seen come into the league in recent years. He's just an exceptional talent. And I want to give the Bears, who have not done much right in their history as a football team since 1985, a lot of credit for having the foresight to load up this roster, to acquire all the draft capital, to prioritize skill position talent, to prioritize the line, and for God's sake, to pass up on Justin Fields, to say we do not want to bring you back. We are going to draft this exceptional talent, even though you had a relatively promising home stretch of the season, because you still can't process the game in a reasonable amount of time to be a high-end NFL quarterback, because you still aren't the thrower of the football that you need to be. There's just such a mixed bag with Fields still that it would not make sense to me to prioritize him just because you've already seen him on the field. And by the way, the fact that you have seen him out there for 3 years kind of tells you, okay, we have a sense of who this guy is. He's not going to be Caleb Williams. So I really do think that they've knocked this out of the park. I think they're going to be a good football team this year. They're just probably a year away from being like a real playoff threat. They could make the playoffs this year, but they're not going to be in those contending conversations.
Yeah, I think it's going to take another year of improvement and retooling and really stocking up, really getting better in the trenches. I think once this team puts some studs in front of Caleb to protect him and, really get that running game back going, and once they can finally build up that defensive line, I think this team is going to be primed to compete. I agree with you. I think they could make a playoff push this year. I'm probably not going to bet on it, though.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the Caleb best rookie season take? Are you in on that?
I like it, and I think you made a great point with Fields. I mean, to bring Fields back to pass up on one of the greatest quarterback prospects I can ever remember evaluating. Like,
Yeah.
when I'm thinking about my all-time guys that just were off the page, Cam Newton is up there for sure as one of the best I ever saw. Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray, and Caleb. Off the top of, I remember I did a video on this. Those are probably the top 5 off the top of my head. I can't remember if I had anybody. RG3 would be up there. RG3 was insane.
Caleb,
yeah,
I'm sorry. Caleb
memory.
clears all of those dudes except arguably Luck.
Yeah, I think he does too. I mean, and to the people being critical about him, just to double down on this, to the people being critical about him playing hero ball, guys, quarterbacks have to make plays when their team is losing. You know, when you're up in games, you can run the ball, and when your defense is great, you can manage it. Am I going to draft J.J. McCarthy #1 overall because he handed it off to Blake Corum and got out the way, and he had a great defense behind him? Come on, guys. You're smarter than this, man. And Caleb, that's the underrated aspect, I think, of him, man. I think this guy understands his value. I think he really understands how to play the game, too. I think a lot of people, because he takes those shot plays and has to play from behind so much, they act like he has a really low football IQ. I think this guy is exceptionally intelligent and a super smart decision maker. So I think that's completely overblown. I also think all the hate he gets is because of the painted nails and people insecure about, I guess, dudes wearing earrings or dudes painting their nails, and because he cried one time at a football game.
Yeah.
You know what? I kind of like that the guy gives a flying know what about the game. The guy wants to win, and he wears his heart on his sleeve. I'm not going to hate on a guy for that.
No, I'm with you 100%, man. I legitimately think the number of people who are incapable now of separating reality from what they want to be true for reasons that have nothing to do with football is insane. And guess what, guys? It's not a good way to go about forming your opinions, because you're going to be wrong on Caleb. A lot of people are going to be really, really wrong on Caleb. I think it's going to be funny. I think he's going to be a monster. I think he's going to be better than Jordan Love. I think he's going to be better than Stroud. I think he's going to be better than Burrow. I think he's going to be better than Herbert. I think he's going to be better than Lamar. Logan.
That's piping hot. I mean, like,
I think he's going to be a top 3 quarterback.
I'm not saying he can't.
Football.
I'm not saying he can't. I think that he has the talent to be up there with Mahomes and Allen. I'm just not ready to make that. And I'll give you credit, man. Hey, if it comes out, I'll say Carson was one of the first on the wave. Yeah. I need to see a little PT before I'm ready to make a declaration.
I'm putting my nuts on the table, pal. I really think that he is the best prospect that we've seen come in at least a decade. And he just has more tools than a Burrow. And versus Lamar, I mean, he still has incredible athleticism, play extension, not on Lamar's level, but he is leagues beyond him as a thrower of the football already. I mean, if you think about where rookie Lamar was at versus rookie Caleb, it's a completely ridiculous comparison. Versus Herbert, I think he has A-plus physical tools. They both do. I think his arm is even a little bit more special. I think he's a more special mover even. And I think that he actually has some more of the balls that I'm looking for in my freakishly talented quarterback. What we were talking about with Herbert, at times he can be too conservative. He can be not willing enough to tap into the fact that he does have these crazy tools. With Caleb, that's not a concern, but I think he knows when to dial it back. I don't know, man. I think he's going to be among the elite of the elite in this league, and I think as a rookie, he's going to join elite company in that respect. So I could not be more all in on Caleb Williams. I really couldn't. Let's talk about the Vikings, Logan, who unfortunately are last in our division predictions, and unfortunately also, they just lost their rookie quarterback, who they picked 10th this year, J.J. McCarthy, for the year with a torn meniscus. Before we get into the overall outlook for Minnesota, Logan, let's just start with that news. How unfortunate is this for J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings that he's going to miss this entire year?
I mean, it obviously sucks. The guy loses a year of what could be experience for him, and especially for a quarterback with McCarthy's play style, right? A big reason why McCarthy got drafted so highly was because of those athletic tools that he possesses. Really, really fast for a quarterback. Great athletic tools. Meniscus is tough, man. That's a really tough one to come back from, and we've seen that take away a lot of athleticism for guys. I'm going to be honest. McCarthy's injury did not have a ton of bearing on where I was going to have the Vikings. I think I would have had them as, bringing up the rear in the NFC North regardless of if he was healthy or not. But, yeah, it does stink. a little silver lining. It'll give him time to just take it all in, man. Take a year, learn under Sam Darnold, who's been the guy, or been in the league for a while, and I do think that's valuable. Sometimes, and this scares me with any quarterback that just gets rushed onto the field, you can ruin a quarterback, man. Some guys need to sit for a little bit and just learn, and it's not just about the coverages and learning the schematics of the game. It's just learning how to be a pro, what you need to eat, how you need to conduct your day-to-day life. McCarthy's going to have a little bit of a break to learn all of that, to get it in, and to take things slow. And so I know it sucks for him having to rehab this, having to do this in your first year is really tough, but I hope he's going to come back stronger. And again, I hope he takes this as an opportunity to take it all in and to learn and look to get ready for next season. But it does open the door for Sam Darnold for a
hooray! I'm sure Vikings fans are so excited about that. Oh, yeah, breath of fresh air, Sam Darnold. No, I think J.J. McCarthy would be the breath of fresh air, Logan. I feel bad for Vikings fans because I know that nobody wants to watch 17 games of Sam Darnold as their starter. At the same time, I don't think you were getting any meaningful difference, any meaningful upgrade if J.J. McCarthy were to start this year. I don't think he was ever going to be more than a home stretch starter if the fan base just got fed up with Darnold, if things went poorly. And I want to be clear, I'm taking some jabs at Sam Darnold because he's always sucked. I do think he'll probably have the best year of his career. He is still Sam Darnold at the end of the day, though. But this isn't the end of the world for J.J. McCarthy. And I do think that he absolutely has a lot of learning to do. And in some ways, as you say, this alleviates the pressure of having to come in year one, of being forced onto the field before you're ready. Because I do think Darnold this year will be better than McCarthy would be out there. Maybe not by a big margin, but I thought the NFL speed seemed to be an adjustment for McCarthy in the first game, more so than even with some of the other rookie quarterbacks who we saw out there. He threw a really bad interception. He got very sped up on one screen pass out of play action. And I thought that he responded well to that. I thought he threw a nice ball overall. He's clearly a good athlete. But you do see that there's a clear adjustment there. And the bummer is that he doesn't get to experience some of this stuff on the field, right? He doesn't get to actually be there in practice. He is only going to be improving in terms of observing what it means to be in an NFL locker room, learning how to lead, learning the X's and O's of the game, which is all valuable, but you are missing out on the physical component of improving. But it's not the end of the world. I don't think he was ever going to be important to their plans for this year. I'm not the biggest McCarthy guy long-term, but I think he can be a solid starter, and now he doesn't have to feel the heat of every week being like, all right, is he going to be out there? How is he going to perform? Give him a year, and he'll have a full off-season after this season in which he can hopefully improve, and then you see a more pro-ready version of J.J. McCarthy next year. The one other back-breaking piece of news from today, Logan, potentially for the Vikings, is Jordan Addison was carted off the field at practice with a leg injury. We have no updates on that at this moment. That's a rough couple of days for them back-to-back, though. So considering those injuries, how do you feel about Minnesota's outlook this year?
Yeah, I like a lot about the Vikings, and I want to start with a guy I'm very fond of, former Steelers assistant coach and defensive coordinator Brian Flores, in this defense overall. Brian Flores, I think, is one of the most brilliant defensive minds in football. I think we saw a complete change in Minnesota's scheme, in Minnesota's temperament, and everything defensively last year. I think that guy deserves a head coaching job in the NFL somewhere. Brian Flores is brilliant. Last season, fourth in terms of rushing defense and yards per attempt, the number 10 passing defense in yards per attempt, and the number 13 scoring defense overall. So they return Brian Flores, and they also add in a lot of talent. You get Jonathan Grenard, Daniil Hunter. They swap places. They bring in the rookie edge, Dallas Turner from Alabama. They add in Blake Cashman, who had 100 plus tackles for the Texans last season. And they also bring in Andrew Van Ginkel, who's been a very solid outside linebacker for the Dolphins. The reality of the situation is the X factor is Sam Darnold. He is 21-35 as a starter, 76 total TDs to 70 total turnovers, and 195 total yards per game with a completion percentage under 60%. None of that's very good. But the silver lining is he's stepping into the best situation of his career. This is going to be the best defense he's ever played with. This is the best head coach and offensive coordinator, the best coaching situation he's ever had. He's going to have the best wide receiver he's ever played with. And I thought the brief stuff that we did see from him in Carolina, I thought he had a great rapport with DJ Moore. I thought they really worked well together. And so I'm encouraged that him and Jefferson can do a little something together. It's hard not to be good with Justin Jefferson. The guy's the best receiver in football. If he can stay healthy, just having Jettas should give him a solid baseline. He's got Aaron Jones in the backfield. The two backbreakers that you mentioned, Jordan Addison, not only injured, is likely going to be suspended with a DUI, so I don't know how that all is going to play out. If he's going to be healthy, if when he is healthy, if he's going to be suspended. So you're likely down him. He's a great number 2. And I've also heard that TJ Hawkinson, we were hearing he may reportedly be out until October or November. Those guys are huge. Those guys are awesome targets. And so that's just going to take this offense down a notch. I would love to see a Baker Mayfield type resurgence from Darnold this season. I know a lot of people are predicting it. I'm hopeful. I'm rooting for the guy. The best thing to me, Carson, that the Vikings can do is give him a running game. The one thing that I think Sam Darnold does is I think he's really good at a play action. I think he's really good at deceiving with his handoffs, and then he's good at making plays either on the run or out of those plays when the defense is on their heels. They had the number 24 rushing offense last season by yards per attempt. They do add in Aaron Jones. I think he will be just a good baseline running back for them. And hopefully that will allow Darnold to manage games. That's the thing for the Vikings. You don't want Darnold having to go out there and win you games. You need him to manage games for you. When you get him out there needing him to sling the rock and make plays, that's where I get a little scared. So Darnold puts a hard cap on how great I think this team can be. This is also a bone-crushingly hard division. I think the NFC North is just really tough. And so ultimately, my prediction, I think this team goes 7-10. I may adjust this to 6-11 depending on how the rest of the year goes. Ultimately, I don't think the record is going to reflect how good this team is going to be. I think this is a tough division to play in. I think they're going to be going to war every single game. The Vikings are going to be okay. They're going to be competitive. But unless Darnold, has that kind of Mayfield resurgence, I just don't think this team is going to smell the playoffs. He puts a hard cap on what this team can achieve this year.
Yeah, his balls aren't nearly the size of Baker Mayfield, so I don't know that I see that coming. I didn't see it coming with Baker, but Baker's achieved much higher highs as a pro than Sam Darnold ever has. Sam Darnold has really always been bad every year that we have seen him as a starter. I mean, he had a decent 6-game stretch for the Panthers, that magical year that he and Baker were both there. Outside of that, dude, I mean, we're just looking at the course of his career, 63 touchdowns to 56 picks, under 69% completion, 6.7 yards per attempt. These are his career numbers. It's never been a question with Darnold of, can he throw a pretty ball? He's talented. He has arm talent. It's all about the processing of the game. And I do think you hit on a lot of key points, right? This is the best coach that he will ever have been the starter for. Shanahan was the best coach, but he barely played there. Best receiver he's played with. Should be the overall best skill position group, receiving core. But I just become increasingly pessimistic about this team because of injuries. If Hawkinson doesn't play for 2 months, and if Jordan Addison isn't out there, I'm sorry, Jettis is special. He can elevate this offense, but he can only do so much when Sam Darnold is his QB. Like, I really think things need to be simplified for Darnold. I think that he needs to be in a very, very favorable offensive situation to give you passable production. And I think no matter what, he's going to be a well below average starting quarterback. Like, the situation can elevate him, absolutely, but it's elevating him from a not good place whatsoever. And I think that most games he probably won't actively fuck things up, but he definitely will cost you a few games, and I don't believe in him to ever be a guy who is going to step up and elevate you. So that's really my concern about the offense. I think they upgraded at running back with Aaron Jones. I think the line is good. They have talent. They have personnel. If they can stay healthy, they have really good talent and personnel. And defensively, I think that they'll be pretty mediocre. They were 18th in yards and points allowed per drive last year. Van Ginkel's a great addition. Grenard is very good. I do not think he is as good as Danielle Hunter, and I think that the rest of their line kind of sucks. So somebody has to be bad in this division is just the reality, right? You can't have 4 teams hovering around 500. It's happened in NFL history. I don't think the Vikings with Sam Darnold are on that tier. I think although the defense may improve with Brian Flores. I don't really expect it to. I think the defense is not very good. I think their quarterback is bad. And so that's why I have them at 6-11. And honestly, if the injury bust continues, I might bump them down to 5-12. I don't think that they're among the league's worst teams, especially not at full strength. It's just the injuries are piling up, and that is concerning me.
Yeah, I agree. And now I think the defense is going to be average to, they're going to hover. Mediocre is a good word. I think Brian Flores is always schematically sound. He has these guys ready to play every single week. I can't sing his praises enough. I think Flores is phenomenal, but there is a hard cap. As you said, man, 3 other really good teams in this division. You are banking on Sam Darnold. Again, that's the thing. Sam Darnold can win you a game when he doesn't screw it up. But when you ask him to go above and beyond, that's just where I get a little bit skeptical. And there's going to be games. Yeah. Quarterback is the most important position on the field, and that's what it determines. When I'm struggling to pick a football game, when I'm between 2 teams that I think are neck and neck, I always ask myself, what quarterback do I trust more? And that normally determines my outcome. Like you said, man, I know I'm really sure I know what Sam Darnold is at this point in his career.
That's what I'm saying. And listen, situation is huge, right? You can put a replacement level dude in elite offenses and they will look a lot better than that. But I do feel like maybe just the time that has passed since we last saw Darnold as a starter has made people start to view him more favorably. Like maybe spending 1 year with Kyle Shanahan has made him a lot better. I thought that his 1 preseason drive was decent, but like the last year we saw him as a full-time starter, he was awful in Carolina. He was still seeing ghosts. He was throwing terrible interceptions, and he was leading a terrible team offense like he did in every year in New York. And no, those are not good situations, but he was really bad in a vacuum, and those situations just made things even worse. I still think you're looking at, again, a well below average starter who now is going to be in a better situation, but without TJ Hawkinson for half the year, without Jordan Addison, then it's not that great a situation with a not great defense in a really tough division, also facing the NFC West. I just think the losses can start to pile up there. Might not be a lot of blowouts, but a lot of losses to good teams. I've got to be out on somebody in this division, and I do think that I'm out on the Vikings. If Darnold pulls it together, if they can stay healthy, then hey, there's talent here. You know, they could be a 500 team, but unfortunately, I'm going to bet on the negative side of the spectrum with this team. Any final thoughts on this division, Logan, before we wrap up? Any more piping hot takes you want to get out there?
No, we were just talking about Minnesota, so I'm going to say Nas Reed.
Nas Reed. Minnesota! Shout out to the good people of Minnesota. Shout out to all the T-Wolves fans. I'm sorry if we upset you guys because you're also Vikings fans, but skol. That's all I can say. Skol. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us here today. We will be back very soon with another division preview, and we will still have some NBA and trivia content going on throughout the remainder of the offseason. But, of course, we're going to be NFL focused now because the NFL is here, baby. And, Logan, I'm not going to lie to you, man. I just got a special tingling in my stomach today. Really diving into football stuff. I am so excited, dude. It's fall. It's pumpkin pie. It's Christmas. It's Sundays. It's what a beautiful time to be alive football season is. I get to watch Josh Allen every week.
I get to watch Russell Wilson crush my hopes and dreams every week.
All right.
You got to be unlimited.
Still football, man. Can't complain, huh? Even if you're crushing your own balls out of frustration watching Russell Wilson take his 18th check down of the game. And then Tomlin looks to the sideline and Justin Fields comes into the game and he takes 8 seconds running circles around himself like a Tasmanian devil, only to eventually take a sack. And then you guys finally lose 49-0 to the Niners.
No, we'll probably lose if we're playing the Niners, yeah, for sure.
I guess that's what happened last year.
Can't be worse than Mitch and Kenny, right? Can't be worse than Mitch and Kenny. That's just what I got to keep telling myself.
Legitimately can't. That's the good news. You could throw Sam Darnold in there, and I would confidently say that that's an upgrade. So,
I concur.
Hey, you got that to hang your hat on. All right, guys, appreciate you. If you want more of our content, find all of our full shows on our YouTube channel. You can also see some of the video essay content that we did throughout the NBA season. We have more stuff coming there, some historical stuff that I'm excited about. You can listen to the show across audio platforms. Follow us across social, TikTok, Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh to see clips from the show, graphics from the list that we make, and above all else, trivia content. And if you want to chat with the fellas, you can join our Discord. Always good, forward-thinking discourse going on in there. And if you want our merch, that is at thevolume.com if you want that nice hat right off Logan's head. So, with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.